So it's Sunday, February 9th, 2020. Year of
Here's a rat?
rat, yeah.
I think it's the rat.
Yeah, New Year just happened, didn't it?
Yeah.
Happy New Year
Happy New Year,
to all
China.
those people. Hope you got to celebrate some. I think that's where it's so crazy to have all these different New Years because I think
Well, my birthday is January 1st, which is Western New Year. And then, let's see,
there's
5 weeks
Muslim
later.
New Year.
5 weeks later is Chinese New Year.
Yeah, and then Hebrew New Year.
Hebrew New Year.
Who else has a calendar?
You have Serbian New Year, January 13th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's dope.
We celebrate both, though, the Western one and the one on the 13th.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't know. We need to just move star date.
It's based on the old Julian calendar because the church never switched over.
I wonder how close that calendar is to, like, the Unix clock.
I think the Gregorian's the closest.
Yeah.
And because Neil deGrasse Tyson always goes on platitudes about how accurate theirs is because of all the modifications and all that shit. It's like, yeah, you know, I'm like, everybody just go to atomic clocks. Let's go. Everybody get an atomic clock and set it to your region and unify that shit, and we'll have. Because this is where you can't add time to a day, but you can subdivide. And the issue is that the subdivision has to be unified in observation in order to be accurate. Otherwise, everybody's like subdividing on their own.
Well, we can. There's the amount of time that we have based on the rotation of the
Right.
Earth relative to the sun.
Yep. You
But
can't add to that
we can't
unless you
change
slow
that.
down the rotation of the planet,
But then
which would fuck things up.
slowly over time, it takes longer and longer for our planet to reach the same point in the solar system. So it's not like
I don't know. I mean,
sun time.
Does the sun or does the planet ever reach the same point in the solar system ever again?
Well,
I don't
no,
think it does.
I don't think it can because I think
Yeah.
Because your
everything's
solar system's moving, too.
yeah,
Right.
it's all moving.
Yeah.
But relative to, like, I mean, we think of seasons, and I think, and so I'm thinking that maybe seasons are flawed. The way that we
Totally.
we count seasons is completely flawed because our relative position doesn't really account for other stellar events like, you know, position of planets or any of that kind of stuff.
Well, it's just like everybody doesn't have the same number of seasons. I know they have like 3 in Korea. And shit like that. And other
Apparently
places might have
Tropical
like 5
places
or
have, too.
Yeah.
There's a
Rain and no rain.
So years ago, I worked for this place called Encore Cafe, and there was this guy I worked with in the kitchen, Jim D, and he said that when he retired, he wanted to move to the state of Oaxaca in Mexico because it's the only place in Mexico that gets all 4 seasons. And I thought, what, Mexico, really? And so I look it up, and it's in like the mountains, and it's down in the middle of Mexico too. So it's kind of crazy. It's like a subtropical region that gets snow. I thought that was pretty.
So it's really high elevation.
Yeah. It's also known for the Oaxacan spear, which is like a 2-foot cola. That kind of looks like a giant cattail, but it's not. And people smoke it.
That's pretty dope.
Yeah. So, places in Mexico where you get snow.
Yeah, I was surprised because I have a friend at work from Mexico, and he was telling me about snow and skiing in certain parts of the country, and I just never, I don't know, I guess you just don't think of it that way because it's so far south.
Yeah. There are all sorts of places where it's like, wait, you get snow, really?
Yeah.
And then there are parts of the United States where it's getting snow, like right now. Like, I think that Florida had a blizzard or something recently. Oklahoma
The
had
iguanas were falling out of the trees.
yeah, it's so cold, the iguanas were falling out of trees.
Meanwhile, it's 65 in Antarctica.
Yeah, warmer in Antarctica than it is in Dallas, Texas. or
Yeah,
Austin,
so it is.
Texas.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where we really are just now getting to the point of being close to understanding what's happening in the universe, let alone on our own planet. Because I think there's this element of wanting it to be global warming caused by humans. But the problem with that is if it's not and it's a natural occurrence, then that means we can't do anything about it. And that's more scary, I think, than the notion of if humans created it. Because if humans created it, that means we can likely reverse it. But there's some shit's happening right now that's like the core of the earth is flipping and the molten lava is closer to the surface and it's causing heat and CO2 deposits or whatever to
Oh yeah,
emerge,
like
and
all of the
methane.
giant methane pockets that are emerging in the
Right.
Arctic.
If that shit is coming from internal,
the stuff that's all decaying now and releasing all of its funky carbon
from
content.
600 billion years ago or whatever, four or not billion, 4 billion years ago, it would have been 600 million years ago or some shit like that, where all the stuff that's being released from then is what's causing.
I was reading that.
I mean, could be
all the climate models have gone hot recently,
right?
Because they finally have enough computing power to successfully model cloud activity, and so they're realizing that all of their previous models had no account for the greenhouse effect of clouds.
Yep.
And then the various types of clouds and their impact at various altitudes and all that kind of good stuff. And so now they're realizing that everything's actually worse than they thought it was because the numbers are now reflecting more accurate data.
Yeah.
So what we thought was noise, 20 years ago because we just couldn't measure it accurately enough then, is now, 10 years ago I think it was, or maybe it wasn't 10 years ago, it was only like 5 or 6, when the carbon content in the atmosphere reached 400 parts per million and then stayed there and then hasn't dropped back down since. There was a really big outcry about how that was, it's make or break now. It's like we're either going to end up with scorched earth or ice age at this point. And ice age or scorched earth, the question shouldn't be like, I'm glad people are asking how do we stop it or how do we fight it or mitigate the impact of this situation. But our seed bank failed. It flooded. This was like kind of amusing to me. It's like, wait, we built a seed ship, basically an earthbound seed ship designed to weather the changes.
But the people who built it are the same ones who fucked up the planet in the first place.
That's right.
So it's like, how my issue with this whole framing is, at what point does Western control over technological advancement be acknowledged as a major failure, in that when you have the Australian brush fires looking to 60 to 80,000 year old methods to figure out how to stop the shit that they can't figure out how to stop, then I'm saying, with all the framing of ancient aliens, when we're talking about, we can't do the shit today that they did before, is because the foundations upon which we built our theoretical frameworks are all wrong in the West. And the problem is, it's because they were stolen, and then the people who stole a lot of the frameworks didn't understand what they were stealing, and then just basically became information authoritarians in a lot of cases, and then tried to reframe these concepts with Protestant deference to a conscious creator in the universe as the foundation for a lot of these mathematical or scientific frameworks. So we're coming to conclusions about a lot of things. So, for example, humans were supposed to be the ones who held domain over the planet as a framework in the first place, as to why we're supposed to be the ones that fix the problem in this framework. And there's a whole lot of Protestant influence on how we even approach that, in that, I don't know if you guys have seen those, they do Discovery, I think it's Discovery or History Channel or whatever. They project what would happen on the planet if humans were wiped out. And basically in about 50 years, nature takes over everything.
75 years.
Yeah, 50 to 75 years, nature takes back over everything.
It's like
So
50
effectively,
for like rural
all we have to
development.
do is stay out of the fucking way,
Yeah.
and nature will fix itself. That's the solution. Just stay out of the fucking way. But because of Protestant influence on the way we approach dominion over the planet, we can't not do something and not stay out of the way.
How long has it been since the Soviets got involved in Afghanistan? It's like 50 years
early
now.
80s,
Yeah.
40 years.
40 years ago. Okay, so and how long before that was the Mujahideen? It was
Talking about another army in Afghanistan.
It was the previous.
The British tried to march 20,000 people in there, and 2 people came out.
Yeah, and that was like.
I was like, I don't know, 200-300 years ago, 500 years ago. It didn't go well.
I remember seeing pictures of like Afghanistan as a fairly developed modern city or modern society. Like,
Western, you mean?
Yeah, no, that's the weird part.
When you say modern, you mean Western. They had westernized.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I mean. Like
Yeah.
there were like, it looked like there was a fountain and people wearing contemporary Western clothing from like the 50s or 60s, maybe even. It was a black and white image.
And I only
And
articulate
it was
that
really surreal
because this has happened in multiple Middle Eastern countries.
Sure. So what was so surreal about it was there's an image of this place that kind of looks like the rest of the world that we're presented with in the United States.
Right.
And then we see that it was, destroyed by other people. And I think that's the part of it that we're not getting the entire story.
Mm-hmm.
We're not seeing the early stages of colonialism.
Yeah.
We're not seeing the way that economic systems were intentionally nerfed, in a sense, so that they would not benefit all parties.
Yeah. Well, we're not getting the explanations of culture clash and iconoclasm and destruction of tradition in the West on purpose. Even down to they don't teach French colonialism in Western.
So that was
history,
like maybe
basically.
50, 60 years ago,
Yeah.
that image that I saw. So in like the last 60 years, that place has gone from what the West would have described as like a modern society,
Mm-hmm.
developed city even, and the place has been turned into a war zone.
Yeah, with the Western influence.
Through Western influence.
Yeah. Because this is, again, when you have all of these attempted coups and then the governments, especially Iran, for example.
Isn't this still all about a pipeline?
That's part of it.
They found $1 trillion worth of lithium in Afghanistan.
Oh, that's even better because that that relieves the stranglehold that Finland or Norway has and that North Korea has.
No, the problem is there's trillions of dollars worth of different minerals, but it's unminable.
Oh.
That's the problem. It's in areas that are inaccessible. So it's a matter of if you get to it, you're basically going to destroy the entire fucking country in the process.
Yeah.
So that's why, again, it's like it's the same shit in other places where there's all these minerals deep within the land, but the only way to get it is to destroy the rest of the area in the process by polluting it. And this is why they're not, it's not like the Afghani people don't know about the shit. They're not going to destroy their own shit for these minerals.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it to them. So again, I think there's this.
They're not going to.
It's the same logic that the Native Americans had before the West invaded as to why they didn't exploit the land. So this becomes when we see what happened when the natives were protecting. In general, it's not because it's not like to say there was a homogenous culture, but in general, there was a non-exploitive approach to
a harmonious
agriculture,
existence.
to hunting and gathering. Yeah, the harmonious existence, but it was about not over exploiting, because then if you over exploited the buffalo, then you can't keep hunting
resource
buffalo.
management.
Yeah, it is 100% resource management. But then when the West came in, they're like, you're not using these resources properly because you're not exploiting them to the 100%.
It's just the improper application. You're applying the
So
methodology to an improper perspective. That's
I
what
think
the
it was
West
like
did.
the year. There was like several years where stories of the West that focused on like Native American stories, essentially, like Dances with Wolves and that kind of stuff. They all came out around the same time.
Starring Kevin Costner.
You know, Kevin Costner and Daniel Day-Lewis was in that Last of the Mohicans movie. And that had some good music, had some good scenes. And there was there were a bunch of them. But I remember also at the same time, I felt like there was this increased presence of in public school, at least the ones that I was in, whereas like, oh yeah, this was in theaters. Let's talk about
right.
the Sioux Indians or Dakota or Lakota Indians. Like, let's talk about all the all this stuff, and it's like, this is really cool. And now I wonder, is this even part of the curriculum anymore?
I doubt it, mainly because they are teaching towards tests in many cases, but that was a very weird. We had a weird time in education where the teachers were trying to establish their own frameworks that were more aware of the non-colonialist rhetoric or non-colonialist narratives, especially including black stuff. Black narratives became more. They were never really part of the curriculum before the late 80s, early 90s, but it became that the activism that was happening in the streets started influencing what happened in the schools very briefly. And this is where once the schools started teaching towards tests, then it became easier for them to start doing the nationalist rhetoric back in the history classes again, in that public school was never meant to create intelligent citizens. It was meant to create good citizens. And I think the problem is people want to defend public school as if it's not impossible for public schools to teach to the same level as private schools. The problem is they don't have the same intentions. Public schools were specifically designed to get kids away from their families while they were working, because before that, those kids would have been working in the fucking mines or some shit, or working in the farms, and then the public schools only came around in strong force once the laws were put in place that kids couldn't work 14-hour fucking days in sweatshops. So then they had to say, oh, what are we going to do with them? We're going to put them in public schools. So then that's when you get the Pledge of Allegiance and shit post McCarthyism.
Yeah.
So all this stuff is you can find the historical origins of all these things concerning the indoctrination and propaganda that comes with public schooling, and when the fucking Pledge of Allegiance was created and why it was created and all these things. And people just don't understand history because public schools don't teach that history, because that's not in their best interest.
It's an organ of the state.
It is.
You reminded me of this thing that Eleanor Roosevelt said, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but she was talking about how liberty and being liberal and is part of the part of it is the goal of freedom and being free, and that she in her life witnessed the rise of Hitler and then the rise of McCarthyism in the United States, and she said that that kind of ideology is like has tried to use liberal and freedom as in a pejorative way somehow. They've tried to leverage the idea of free thinking, the things that get us child labor laws and the rights for black people to vote and for women to vote and for just acknowledgement of the social services that communities would already had been engaging in for generations. There's a concept of the poor farm or the poor house where people would go back in the day when they needed help to get on their feet, and they sucked it up and they went and got a job and they figured their shit out. And we do something similar now. It's just a little bit more, it's quantified because we have dollars, and dollars are valued at some rate, and it's kind of based upon the promise of future labor. And so
100%. That's all it's based on now.
Yeah.
A fiat currency. It's not based on gold, and a lot of people don't even realize that. Which is the insane thing. You ask older people. I mean, even some younger people don't know.
But that's been the case for what now? 70 years or something.
Yeah,
Longer than that.
a long time. Whenever our current credit system was adopted on a wide level, when there was widespread adoption of our current credit system, that's when the trap was, you know.
I mean, going back to an earlier point, if it doesn't speak to consumerism, then you're not going to have the backing of the state and the corporate machine.
Right.
So that's what they're interested in. America is the machine that keeps the world economy going at this point. People spending money here that they don't have.
It's a brave new world.
Is driving a lot of things.
But isn't that the wrong path? And that's what
Yeah,
I'm getting
no,
at.
I agree.
In that,
I agree.
At what point do we say this is not a sustainable path? And there is a sustainable path, but we have to figure out how to shift everybody's economic sensibilities towards that. In that, even down to, okay, this is a thought experiment. If we live in a capitalist society, right, we assume that people with capital have the influence, right?
Makes sense.
It makes sense. However, what ends up happening is people without capital find ways to create influence. So then, if you have a system that does not, if you start people off with no capital, and you're saying you have to compete with people who have way more capital than you, in this specific system, those people are forced to find ways to leverage the system, to find those gaps, to then exert influence on that system. And that's when you get nefarious acts most of the time. And that's ultimately, they're forced to, it's not, there's no moral.
You're tuning survival for profit.
Right. And this is why I'm not moralizing it, because I think because they're forced to do it, you can't, if somebody is forced to steal diapers to put on a kid that they didn't necessarily intend to have because they didn't have quite good access to preventative health care, but also they didn't have quite good access to the education to understand why they shouldn't be raw dogging, you can't really blame that person for being in that situation the way society does. And then my issue is,
the blanket statement is, we provide the same level of education, but the reality is that the resources aren't evenly distributed.
Right. But what I'm getting at is, then if you're acknowledging that this society has this motivation in there, and then you build up this whole capitalist system that's about exploiting this person who's in need, what we have is feudalism that's reinforced by the legal structure, that's reinforced by the economic structure, that we're then told is freedom when that person never actually had a chance to do anything but make a decision that was going to put them in this system. So this is when black people talk about we're forced in the system, I don't think a lot of people actually understand what that means, because they've never actually stepped back to really figure out what freedom of choice actually means, what right to work actually means. What does right to work actually mean? That means if you get stuck in a situation where you don't have any fucking money, that means legally you're allowed to work for the lowest money that somebody will pay you. And that means if people know that law exists, then they're going to pay the lowest they fucking can, because everybody's going to be put in a situation where they are always going to have to take the lowest amount to survive. And this is this forced compliance with...
Well, right to work was also kind of... It was used by anti-education union. Or
weird.
Like, it was
weird how those things go in hand.
They wanted to bust education unions because teachers... I think it was in like Wisconsin.
Yeah, with Scott Walker.
Yeah.
Oh, is that what started the whole Occupy Wall Street?
Yeah, I think that's when that's where it all came to a head. And then of course there are other states, like I think Kansas is a right to work state. Kansas is a good example of a state where they applied heavy conservative ideology on how to balance their budgets, and then ended up borrowing like $500 million from the government to pay for their to pay for their own services.
Yeah.
And then what else happened? They cracked down on immigration so hard that the western end of the state experienced financial collapse because
They didn't have any labor.
their entire economy was based upon migrant laborers.
Because I guess what I'm getting at is that's not capitalism.
That's not
I don't even know what to even call what you're describing at this point. Because what we have in this
They call
country,
it crony capitalism.
Well,
it's like so far beyond crony
The people
capitalism.
that voted that situation
It's like-
in Kansas into play, they were championing things like right to work.
Mm-hmm.
They were,
People are running on ideologies, not actual
and
economic
it's not even
solutions. That's the
ideologies.
problem. You're trying to
They're-
get elected.
They're
You're not
running
trying
on
to solve
the
anything.
branding of some kind of policy reform that they have presented, but they haven't provided details for, and then they give it a name because they want to associate all these ideas with brand.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I mean, it's marketing.
Yeah.
it's the marketing. It's all in the branding.
Marketing has ruined everything.
Yeah.
Marketing has ruined
Right to
everything.
work. Right to work should be a social
interesting
reform,
statement.
not a union busting platform.
Right to work is,
It's just a strange concept.
when you think about it, it has to be one of the dumbest things
Well, no, when you
that
think
has
when you
ever been
when you
fucking
think about-
implemented in any context.
when you think about what they've actually implemented and how they described it, yes. But when you just hear right to work,
it sounds awesome.
it sounds like
it sounds fucking
it sounds like
cool.
some kind of social reform that's gonna change the way that we approach what work is and what a job is, and what labor means, and
When I hear right to work, I hear in my head, if I have a skill, I should be able to go out and get a job in that skill.
Yeah.
No matter there should be no circumstance that's stopping me from going out and working. Not some fucking person who owns a specific job saying, hey, if you don't want to work for this low amount, then you're not going to work. I should have a right to work regardless of that fucking asshole who's a mom and pop's douchebag bending the law and exploiting it. And that's what right to work implies to me.
yeah.
But then when you realize it's actually
definition.
for the employer to exploit me,
Yeah.
this is the main problem with giving businesses personhood, because now legally that a business can have a person, like a personhood.
Yeah.
They are a citizen that deserves equal protection under the law, unfortunately. So now the government has an onus to protect their right to abuse me in the same way that the government should be protecting my right as a citizen to not be abused by an employee because I'm under duress for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And, so I don't know if you guys have put applications out recently. One of the things that happens is people who are trying to exploit people go towards job boards and find applications and start trying to commit fraud with, like, using those people. So one of the main methods is they'll say, oh, we're going to hire you as a secret shopper and we're going to send you a check, and you go deposit this check and you go buy gift cards and tell us about your experience buying these gift cards. Well, it's clearly a fucking scam.
Yep.
But the problem is, if somebody needs to pay their rent and somebody's broke and somebody's been out of a job for 2 months, they're going to be like, maybe this is real. And they're going to hope and fucking pray that this is not a scam. And they're going to convince themselves that shit's not a scam. That's what happens when you put a person in duress.
Yeah.
And this is what happens when you have a system that demands people constantly have capital, but you don't start them off with any sort of capital. So every time somebody has to pay rent and they don't have any capital, that's our government putting them in a vulnerable situation, saying, hey, you might need to go prostitute yourself. You might need to go fucking suck a dick. You might need to go sell some drugs. You might need to go do some shit you really don't want to do. And in the process, we might jail you and put you in a system that's going to exploit you in the same fucking way. But guess what? We don't care because somebody needs their rent.
Man, it's like playing Monopoly or the game of life and starting out with no cash at all.
Yeah. That's what our government does to us in a quote-unquote capitalist society, when really it's just hidden feudalism.
Yeah.
It's hidden feudalism. And the problem is people are so convinced that socialism is the scary thing that they're not even looking at the fucking monster in the room saying, what is this actual capitalism thing that we're dealing with? Because what happens is if you get so wrapped up in the religious traditions of capitalism versus communism, you don't actually examine what capitalism has done to Americans, because this happened slowly. This didn't used to be this way. And the problem is they started picking off different segments of the population. So first they did it with black people. Then well, not necessarily first. They did it with Jewish people before black people. Well, it's hard to say because they did it with Native Americans originally. So when you isolate segments of the population and remove their land, you remove their capital, you remove their access to banks, you remove their policing, you have them policed by outside forces, they're basically creating concentration camps in cities. And the fucking police forces are non-local officers. It doesn't matter if they're black or white. They're non-local. That's the issue. If you're coming from a different city and you come in and police people that you have no connection with, you're going to feel real comfortable pulling them over and fucking asking them questions about where they're going and maybe fucking doing shit that you don't have to fucking sleep with at night, because then you go home to your different city and you don't have to wake up to the fucking person you just violated being your neighbor.
You kind of just described one of the districts within Mega City.
Mm-hmm.
And for years now, we've had, the Supreme Court ruled that law enforcement doesn't protect and serve. They just enforce laws. And so that's...
They protect and serve property.
Yeah, well, that's law enforcement, though.
Yeah.
That's enforcing a trespassing law or some
theft.
I mean, the owners of capital are always going to have this thing skewed in their favor, right?
Of course.
Even the amount of money you can pay for a lawyer is going to determine what kind of outcome you have in the justice system.
Yeah.
You might not necessarily directly buy a judge, but if you can buy yourself 10 years of paperwork, then the thing might just go away completely.
Yeah.
And especially if you're dealing with an individual citizen that you're trying to harass.
Well, and it's in that context that, how do you ask people who are born into that, being aware of it, to trust it? I think it's pretty absurd when people expect that we look at this system and then are like, oh yeah, my vote counts.
It's a masterful sales job, man.
I'm gonna vote, but
against
why
my own interest and be excited about it.
I did that once when I was, an undergrad, and fucking Obama was running on hope and exploiting this emotion that we all have as humans.
Oh, I thought we voted for Obama so he could be the first black president.
I mean, kind of, but I think deep inside we all the people who voted for him wanted him to be the things he was telling us he was going to be.
Well,
and we knew, part of us
audacity of
knew
hope.
that he wasn't going to be, but we wanted to fucking believe it so bad that we were out celebrating in the streets. Like, we did it! We did it! We got the man that finally isn't going to be lying to us about who he is. Then that motherfucker gets in office,
whole time.
becomes the same motherfucker
The entire time.
that everybody else is, and then we're supposed to act like that didn't just happen.
Well, South Park kind of framed it pretty well. It was like a Ocean's 11 type heist to win the presidency. One of them had to get it.
Right.
I mean, if you think about the rest of the world, I don't know. I know you've traveled a lot, but in my opinion, the reason you could bribe a police officer one-on-one somewhere else isn't necessarily just because the country is poor, but because everybody over there understands and doesn't believe in the system.
Right.
People will treat you like an actual person. There's actual human-to-human interaction. There's a lot of hierarchy and a lot of things that are wrong, but in general, people treat each other as people. Whereas over here, we're social security numbers, we're bank account numbers. You can't really bribe a cop like that.
No, not in America. I mean,
And they don't get paid any better.
No. And the issue is, you can bribe. Here's how you can bribe a cop in America, with fucking a woman, and it's only because American cops are misogynist dudes that play into
Yeah, I mean,
that pathos so much that you could bribe a cop with a fake catfish woman account before you could bribe a cop with $10,000.
yep.
And that's the shit where America is so wrapped up in machismo and proving oneself as a man to other men that's over and over how cops in America keep getting fucked up is they think with their dicks repeatedly. And again, it's like, I don't know if that's better or worse, or I mean, I don't I don't know if I don't think it's necessarily any better. But
I don't know what's better or what's worse, but I definitely noticed the difference.
yeah. Well, because that's just like in other countries, when you encounter a cop that's on the street, that cop is the law right there. And you know that cop's the law. That cop knows that cop's the law. And that situation could go any number of ways. And it's, you have to be a lot more savvy, I think, in other countries to not end up trafficked or some shit,
Yeah, life is a lot cheaper. That's for sure.
Yeah. Because that's where I know, I've been in spots where there's no electricity, there's no fucking street lights, and we're riding along, and a person in fatigue steps out in the middle of the fucking street with an AK.
Right. You
And
have
it's
to pull
like,
over.
well, you gotta fucking pull over, and they're taking you're giving them a bribe to pass. There's no fucking toll booth.
Right.
But you gotta give them 50 shillings or whatever.
Yeah.
Or else you ain't gonna fucking pass.
And that conversation's already well established. So
Yeah.
as long as you're with a local.
And that shit, who knows how many times that'll happen on your journey between A and B. But again, if you're living in that area, you know what it's like. And I think Americans see that shit on TV and don't really understand that the cops are doing the same shit here. It's just different.
Yeah.
It's the same but different. There's this desire to believe that we have freedoms that other people don't have, but they just reshape the quote unquote freedoms to perpetually keep people wrapped up in that.
I feel like I carried I'm not sure what it was. It felt like 2 gallons worth of milk, in a cardboard box that wasn't quite stable.
Good times.
Yeah.
Well, we do have a very strange system.
I mean, from some perspectives, any system can be viewed as strange. I just think that what we're seeing in America is a system that is very specifically aimed at destroying the family unit.
Yeah.
And that's how you're going to maximize consumerism out of an individual. When it's all about you, there's no self-sacrifice, there's no communal effort.
Yeah.
You're going to spend the most amount of money on stuff.
Oh, there's a communal effort. It's in identifying what is different.
Right.
It's in celebrating failure.
Yeah.
And those are weird. These are kind of strange concepts, but when we see things that are different, we don't just keep going about our lives. Most people are will point it out.
Yeah.
Not just point it out, they'll really point it out. They'll tell people. They take pictures.
That's right-wing humor.
They put that shit all over the internet and then make a meme out of it.
I've realized what you're describing is right-wing humor. That's what people who are conservative-minded think of as quote-unquote humor. Because if you think about it, think of an actual right wing comedian, and they're probably somebody pretending to be right
Funny.
wing. No, pretending to be right wing.
Sorry.
So it's a whole different level. So like Jeff Foxworthy, Larry the Cable Guy, they're doing characters. Fucking Ron White, they're pretending to be hillbillies
Yeah.
in a way that appeals to the right wingers because they're all about surface level humor, but the fact that they're doing characters makes it this whole meta narrative about right wingers not understanding that those things are characters in a way that when you look at it from that perspective, it's like I'm really wondering if there is a part of the population that have broken emotional neural pathways as to where what they think is funny is just like, oh, you have a broken leg, look at your fucking broken leg, fucking Forrest Gump, and or just like, oh, your name is Nicola, Ricola,
Yeah.
Ricola.
That was the first nickname I got. When I
Bro,
came here.
how did I know? How did I know? How predictable is that shit? And what I'm saying
Ricola.
Yeah.
it's
First thing I heard.
Look, how long ago? It must have
when
been
I tell people what my name
fucking
was. 92, man.
Yeah, 92. People were so predictable because they're like, oh, the first thing I see, I'm gonna point at that thing and pick it. Like, oh, his name is different. How is it funny? How is this close to something that we can make fun of? And then it's like that attitude and it's part of bully culture, but that approach to what people identify as being funny then defines this whole segment of America's definition of humor altogether. And that's why I knew that that's what fucking people are going to go after, because it's so obvious. Like, somebody in their right mind who's actually trying to be funny, like, oh, that's not funny at all. Like, why would I go for the easiest low-hanging fruit?
I feel like in the early 2000s,
It's not
like,
very
around,
witty.
like maybe even
for
like
sure.
2005 in that range. I feel like there's a really overwhelming shift within comedy where just it was like whoever was the loudest was the funniest.
yeah.
Whoever can make the
Sam Kinison
like
was
there's
one of those.
well, I think he was the archetype for that kind
Yeah.
of thing. But at some point there was this like big insurgence, like a large group of comedians that were all they make strange noises.
Well, I just tried to watch Leslie Jones's stand up, and she was doing that, and I couldn't finish it. It's like it's too much. It's a very specific period in comedy that it is. It's just the shock value of somebody yelling everything, like Gilbert Gottfried, shit like that. Because then there was Bobcat Goldthwait did that weird voice. I mean, he wasn't yelling, but
He had a character, but
right. There's just a period where comedy was like, oh, let me say this thing in a funny voice. And it's just a normal thing, but because I'm saying it weird, it's funny. And it's like...
every so often I go to the Comedy Attic in Bloomington. And, it's a good time. The main event is what you go for. But sometimes the opening acts say some funny stuff. And I remember this one of the last times I went. I get outside, and I just wanted to go home because I was tired, and the chairs there aren't really that great. But put up with it because you're gonna laugh for a while. And this guy came out, and he's like, "What'd you think of the last act?" And I was like, "I thought it was all right." And he just like sneered, and it was a lot of left-wing humor. So there was a lot of stuff that required that you had been paying attention to the whole show, because he was referencing things that he'd been talking about the whole time. I think the only way that you wouldn't enjoy something like that is if you just couldn't pay attention.
Right. Yeah.
There's got to be something to it about, like, if the jokes don't string together right, then it's just a bunch of bad jokes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, But even then, you have people like Stephen Wright or Mitch Hedberg that don't need a meta narrative in their jokes,
Yeah.
and can still be funny throughout a whole show. And because the problem is, if you have an act and there's no climactic joke, then it leaves the audience feeling unsettled.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to have something that builds. And if it's like a big joke at the end or a joke that references something that kept going through, it's one or the other for most comedians. But then because some comedians don't care or get that structure, then they get these shows that just kind of teeter off.
Yeah.
I mean, but then on top of that, the placement in the act defines how they do their show, because that Comedy Addict, they specifically have the first person not do that.
Yeah.
They have mediocre jokes on purpose.
Yeah.
So it's not meant to overshadow the final act, and it's building up the audience.
Yeah,
again.
I think they call them the warm-up act.
Yeah, for sure, the warm-up act.
That makes
but
sense. Yeah.
it's the same shit with music. You can't go in and play the fucking heaviest shit at 7 p.m.
You can, but they call it sound test or sound check.
I mean, but then you fuck up the entire audience. Like it the same shit
you can do it at 7, but
at
the show
7
can't start till
p.m.
10.
will scare everybody off the dance floor.
Yeah.
That if you play it at midnight, everybody will flock to the dance floor.
That's 100% true right there.
And I think it's the same with jokes. It's the same with, timing is very much part of everything, obviously. But this gets back to, this is why right-wing humor is very removed from what I think most people would actually define as humor, in that the timing doesn't necessarily matter. It's all about, the obvious. It's almost all about the obvious and the lowest hanging fruit and the easiest shit to point at. And that's what... I've seen over and over, because I'm starting to right-wing people ruin the internet, as far as I can tell. Anytime there's no way around it. Like, I'm not gonna fucking cut corners on that statement, because as far as I can tell, anytime a right-wing person is interacting on the internet, it's just ruining everybody's fucking time. And that's where, when I'm looking at why, it's because their understanding of what other people define, and not, because it's not just left-wing people, it's people who are logical in modern thought. And it's like, you don't have to be on the left wing to be logical in modern thought. The problem is most right-wing people just aren't, as far as I can tell. And obviously I haven't done an extensive study. I haven't done...
I'm not even sure that people that think that they're on the left wing are actually on the left wing.
Right. I don't think they are. And that's why I'm defining it.
Because we get to the authoritarian versus libertarian.
Mm-hmm. Or even then, you got people like Bernie Sanders saying he would preemptively strike Iran and North Korea if they had a nuclear weapon, just saying yes. And that's why I'm like, well, that's a pretty fucking right-wing answer from the person who's the farthest left candidate we have right now. Mm-hmm. He just straight up said yes. And
what's the other Steyer? Tom Steyer? Is that one of those names? Is that a real name?
It sounds like.
I think I remember him saying something that just seemed like, wait, this guy's a billionaire? What the hell's he doing?
He's the other billionaire. That's right.
Yeah,
him and Bloomberg.
Yeah, but it was interesting because he's all like environmentally. His message is all environmentalism, it seems, which I like. But it's also like, wait a second, he's already got billions of dollars. He could just do this.
Right, exactly.
Why does he need anyone else's money to do this shit?
Exactly.
Come on, Bruce Wayne.
Just do it. Just do it.
Just fucking do it.
And that's what's pissing me off about this shit is you have these people who are getting in these positions now. In 2020, everybody should be cognizant enough to ask why these people don't just fucking do these things. When Jason Momoa is trying to protect the fucking mountains in Hawaii, he's not running for fucking president to do that shit. He's getting on Instagram, making a hashtag, protect Mauna Kea, whatever the fuck the name of the mountain is, getting people donating money, and
so did you see the backlash image about that?
No.
So
I mean, I'll just use that as an example.
Oh no!
Like I just randomly.
Someone took an image of Aquaman, and they did a bunch of Photoshop manipulation, and they made him bald, made his head like kind of bulbous. He still has hair around the sides and back, so he still has long hair, but he's missing hair on the top of his head. He's real thin. He's got like Popeye frame almost, but still kind of looks humanish, humanoid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people are making fun of him for doing shit like that.
I mean, what's the point? I don't get it.
Someone just doesn't like him.
Yeah.
You know, that's how petty it gets.
That's why I'm like, is there like a point?
Yeah, no. I'm just establishing a level of petty here that exists on the internet. That's just like.
I mean, yeah, of course, but I guess what I'm getting at though is then you have people who use the internet for petty, and then people who are stars who use the internet for activism to then also promote the activism they're doing in real life. But he doesn't need to fucking become president to do that shit.
Mm-mm.
And that's
He can
where,
just do it.
right. I mean, eventually, I guess he could become president now that we have a fucking reality TV show star that did. But, I mean, he's not the first actor to do it. But, you know, if Jason Momoa eventually became president, it would be because he was an activist originally. It's not, he didn't become president to do the shit he's being an activist about.
President Dwayne Elizondo Mountain Dew Herbert Camacho. I mean, that's kind of what I think of when I think of actors assuming these roles, but I mean,
I was thinking Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. Well, I think Ronald Reagan's obvious.
Yeah.
I think any more people are more aware of the history of idiocracy than they are of our own political history.
I mean, at the same time, you know, when I look at, so here's if you have Mike Judge who made Idiocracy,
As a joke.
kind of, because okay,
and then it becomes an allegory.
kind of, because he also made Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah.
He knew what the fuck
And
he was
King of the
doing.
Hill. Yeah, he knows.
But King of the Hill's not at the same level of
No.
stupid as Beavis and Butthead.
No, it's not.
And the problem is, if you make something as stupid as Beavis and Butthead aimed at children, you can't turn around and make Idiocracy as like, oh, I'm prophetic, because you fucking did it.
But look, I don't
He
think
did it.
I don't think that he was the one that's like
Not that-
unprophetic.
I mean-
I think it's the cult following of Beavis and Butthead that decided that it would become a documentary.
By being stupid.
No, just by existing.
That's what I'm saying.
Like-
that's what I'm getting at is in
Like
he's the
imitating
chicken,
art.
he's the chicken and the egg and the fucking velociraptor that came before
That laid the egg.
Right. But then we look at Idiocracy like, oh, it's so prophetic, but the dude who made it fucking made the media that was gonna produce the idiot generation in the first place. The fucking Beavis and Butthead generation never had a goddamn chance, man. Never had a fucking chance.
That was an entertaining show.
It was. That shit was firing serotonin and dopamine and fucking all kinds of shit that the kids didn't understand why it was doing it, because then they were mixing in the music videos and it was throwing all kinds of fucking neural fireworks that your brain had never had before in a way that kids never had a fucking chance against Beavis and Butthead, man. And then on top of that, they employed the rebellious narrative of society's gonna fucking try to shut these kids down in the show with the principal
And the neighbor.
Oh, the neighbor
That became Hank Hill.
Yeah, and again, it's all these things.
Their kids were whacking in his tool shed.
Whoa!
They built in the narrative of they're gonna try to take this show from you kids, but rebel and go watch this show in your bedroom at night, 10:30 p.m. and fucking turn your lights off and make it seem like you're sleep,
Yeah.
but watch Beavis and Butthead and watch Eon Flux afterwards.
Yeah.
That's a good one. The Max was on at that time, too.
The Max was really good. I always thought,
Liquid television, man.
yeah. The Max was really fun. I haven't been able to find a really good copy. It's always a really poor resolution copy of it, but I tried to watch it not too long ago, and I forgot just how brutal that guy is. He just smashes all those rabbits all the time.
He's schizophrenic.
Yeah.
Which was, you know, was revolutionary at the time to even have the notion of a schizophrenic anywhere near a comic book or a cartoon or whatever. But yeah, it's obviously a very exaggerated representation of it. But I don't think it was meant to be a commentary on mental illness, as far as it wasn't like a PSA or anything.
No, I thought it was just supposed to illustrate the struggles that he went through.
Yeah, just this crazy superpowered person.
And he listens to his nurse, who has an alternate role in his alternate reality.
Yeah. Yeah, those were...
And the rabbits turned into the shadow creature things,
story, yeah.
right? And there was that like weird wizard magician dude. Man, that shit was so weird.
Yeah.
That's the kind of story that I think it was saved by being presented in an animated form.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think
you can
there's any way that this
action
could have any kind of live action.
No. Maybe now, if it's like Doctor Strange-esque.
Maybe like Doctor Strange and Hulk style story, because he'd have to be able to transform into the max, and everything would have to get weird and then unfold in, quick time.
I think seeing the Doctor Strange representation of the mirror universe, I think they can do a lot of things now that they couldn't have done 20 years ago even.
That crazy kaleidoscope vision.
Yeah, because it looked real.
Well, it was the resolution in our playback systems is finally sufficiently high that you can see enough detail when it's in a highly detailed image.
Yeah.
We can cram enough information into it so that it's not just a blob.
Yeah.
And so that it's detailed enough that when you go actually look at it, it's like, oh, whoa.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail.
Yeah. And it makes sense. Like what you're seeing starts to make sense instead of just being this shiny metallic surface that folds around and twists in front of you. It's like, yeah, shiny metallic shit.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see reflections of buildings and they change and it all makes sense on some really weird level. Like, how do they decide to make, how do they know that or how do they decide on what to put in the reflected image so that it would all make sense? How are they modeling it? Is it some kind of crazy rendering engine? I mean, that has to be it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a kaleidoscope.
Right.
I don't want to
Well,
try
there's
to minimize that
kaleidoscope
kind of
effects on...
But not like Doctor Strange. That's like a whole different level.
They probably created one.
Yeah.
They probably created their own algorithm for the kaleidoscope effect, which then in 15 years they'll release it and sell it or some shit once they've eventually exploited it enough for themselves.
At that point, you'll be able to go to your favorite electronic music EDM concert festival, and it'll be the thing that's projecting the stuff on the surface.
Yeah.
So everything will look like it's
that's dope though.
Crazy unfolding in front of you, but really it's just a bunch of cubes and
that's just like I don't know if you've seen the show for I think Datsik.
Oh, they do a bunch of what is it? What do they call it? A projection mapping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's that type of shit where at some point there was research being done on that.
Amon Tobin
is
is really, I think he's got the most.
He's done a lot of research.
His team has put the most effort into developing that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of getting it to look really just next level. I think Deadmau5 puts a lot of effort into his team puts a lot of effort into the visuals for their shows.
Which is why when I I'm not trying to harp on capitalism, but it's like you go look at these people, and it has nothing to do with money as far as why they're trying to do these things, and they push the shit in such a direction where, it's like you don't necessarily even have to understand what they're doing to appreciate it. But when you are able to technically comprehend what they're doing, it's like, what the fuck? Like, are these dudes aliens? Because that's where I start to look at technical accomplishments and what they contribute to humanity and what is being put into them and shit like that, where, you know, it's like, okay, we have to look at Elon Musk has pushed forward electric cars a lot.
And now he's releasing electronic music.
A whole lot. Oh, fuck that.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I don't want to talk about that.
He pushed electronic music back 5 years by doing that, unfortunately. Like, oh God. Yeah.
Oh, you're being generous.
Yeah.
10,
Yeah.
15.
I'm trying not to shit on him for it. But this is the problem where if you become a successful billionaire, then society's like, oh, we'll let you DJ, we'll let you release music, and we'll fucking play your song millions of times, even though it fucking is trash. This shit is trash, but we're gonna play it 100 million times because you're Elon Musk.
I didn't.
And it's like, no, society, we can't do that, because then that's how you get fucking DJ Paris Hilton and fucking Elon Musk producing tracks where you're like, no, dude, go to the, like, you got to start from the fucking rookie shit to just like everybody else. Just because you're Elon Musk doesn't mean you can step in.
Your credentials don't transfer over.
No, they don't. They don't at all.
There's a video circulating some DJ groups on Facebook last week, and it was this person spinning on some CDJs, and at one point they just start slapping the jog wheel like real hard and real fast. They just keep going and keep going, and it's not a loop because you see different people walking around behind them. Like, what the hell's going on? Who let this person in here? Like,
yeah, I don't know, man. It's like, you know, Mike Tyson DJs. He could be good.
Man, you never know.
But I bet he's fucking terrible.
Yeah.
I don't know if Shaq can.
But
DJ.
nobody's gonna be like, "Hey, Mike, take some lessons, bro."
Yeah.
But then nobody's gonna, you know. Again, we get in this spot where it's
So Shaq,
like when
Shaq
Kobe was
DJ.
rapping. Somebody, no, Kobe.
Kobe should've-
Shaq was rapping. His shit was terrible
Shaq,
too.
Yeah, both of them. So both of them step off the mic, bro.
Let's see who else.
Damian Lillard raps. I heard it was good. I've never heard it myself, so I don't have any opinion on it. But I know he's another one that.
Who is it?
Damian Lillard from the Trailblazers.
It's like Tyrone Woodley from the UFC. He released a track called "I'll Beat Your Ass." It was fucking garbage. Fucking garbage. But none of his homies would step up and tell him, apparently. He should have never released that shit.
He was gonna
Should've
fucking
never
beat their
released
ass.
that
man.
shit. And then he loses his title afterwards. But, you know, I'm not saying people can't cross over. It's just a matter of if you're good at something, society wants people to skip to the front of the line and whatever.
On everything, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but then they'll try to hold people back like Michael Jordan, where he rightfully went to the minor. I mean, I don't even know if he was good enough to play in the minor leagues when he played baseball. He probably wasn't,
Probably.
but at least he didn't go to the majors.
We got a caller. Hey, what's up?
Hey, hopefully I didn't cut in at the wrong time.
Yeah, this is Ryan. He's
It's always the right time.
He's a second time caller. He brings the goods. What's going on, Ryan?
I try anyway. Well, I was hearing about, because you have this grand person that's accomplished something here, like Elon Musk, then automatically means that whatever creative work they do, in this case, for lack of a better term, DJ music, is automatically going to be good just by namesake, almost with branding. But it's a problem that's kind of, I think, tarnishing that kind of music. But I think, definitely other genres have been through it too over the years. If we remember Bruce Willis's, for instance, Return of Bruno album. Now, wow, that was clearly a case of a guy out of his element. I think that would be a polite critical review. I don't know what you think. If you haven't heard it, I don't know. but save it for a time when you're in a giggling mood. Or
Oh,
you
I
know,
forgot about
even
that.
back.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Oh my gosh, it is not a good album.
Because it's
unless you're
like
looking
blues,
for, like,
right? Or
It's well,
I don't even know
no.
how to
He
describe it.
kind of tries to sing like blues over 80s synth tech R&B type rhythms. You know, like kind of new wave. But
that-
he's
That's
it's
like
fun time. That's one song.
that's
I
one of
think.
those just because you can doesn't mean you should kind of
Yeah.
moments.
No, it's almost like he knew it was bad, but just yeah, I don't really know. I'm just gonna chalk that one up to coke use for him. I don't know. But even, you know, going back even earlier, you have like this very much acclaimed, accomplished actor like Richard Harris, who makes this bozo song, MacArthur's Park, which I think has a good hook, and the lyrics just make me fall to the floor. But nonetheless, I wouldn't say it's probably, you know, Grammy worthy or anything like that. So I don't know if you've heard that old crusty classic. Later, they made a disco version of it. I believe it was Donna Summer or Gloria Gaynor, and it had to have been by contract because, wow. But you know, whichever the two it was, without Googling, they absolutely nailed it. And I guess that kind of comes to full circle here, where you have someone in their element that's taking a song from someone that was out of their element and then just, you know, crushing it.
Yeah.
I've seen that with other music too, like, you know, an example escapes me, but yeah, someone that
Sometimes
did,
the cover can be better than the original. I think that happens with Bob Dylan songs a lot of times. Like,
yeah.
you know, All Along the Watchtower was a great example.
Well, then he started playing it like Hendrix's band,
Right.
so
Because he knew it was fucking
that's
better.
how you're supposed to play Watchtower. Someone showed him how to play his own song.
Yeah. But, you know, that's very rare. But I think this gets... I had this discussion recently. When you have the essence of a song, I think it matters who sings it to capture the essence, because then you can get, you know, a Dolly Parton version and a Mariah Carey version and a Boyz II Men version of a song or whatever that captures different elements of something, and they're all equally valid, but it doesn't necessarily... It depends... Okay. When you're born...
It's how you stage it. It's
right,
how you stage
but
the
it also
song.
depends on the listener's proximity and time being born to whichever version. So it's like,
Okay.
if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
you know, if you were born near the cover, then the original is going to sound good to you, but your version is going to be the cover. And if you were born when the original happened, the cover may sound good, but the original will always be your version. And this is where I'm, you know, people have a hard time accepting that preference is an individual thing, because everybody wants to share the joy that a song gives to you with other people. And I think inherently there's a good side to it, but then it's like, oh, if I prefer this version, you're going to say, well, no, my version's better. And there's this element of music can become
Childishness almost.
yeah, it can become very adversarial because people become very protective about their tastes. And that's where, again, I think this, at the core, people want to share their joy, but they also need to protect the things they hold sacred at the same time. So when Billie Eilish doesn't know who Van Halen is, people flip the fuck out, because to them, that's their childhood. But this 18-year-old kid doesn't know, like, that offends their being, because this 18-year-old kid doesn't know who they are. And that's, you know, it's weird, but I get it.
Without even trying to understand what other performers are in her lexicon that she's familiar with. You know, I might not be ever heard of Van Halen, but, you know, I listened to the entire Blue Note catalog, you know. So if you leverage it that way, Just because you're exposed or not exposed is all kind of relevant, I guess. Is kind of the point there.
Well, let me ask this question then. So, what if you have a person who is becoming big in a certain any genre of music? Do you think that person needs to know the history of that music, or be in a spot where they openly acknowledge the quote unquote big people in the history of that music? Because I'm not sure necessarily where I stand, so I'm trying to figure out where other people stand on this conceptually. Because
I think no one, in especially with the exposure that all kinds of artists have now, no one is going to keep up with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And as time goes on, it's just a longer and longer and bigger catalog of all music. So just because someone doesn't have a foundation of this, I don't think can't bring it to the table. And if they have the recognition, especially, I heard Van Halen for the first time, not my cup of tea, but honestly, I really like this, and this, and recognize their skill set and what have you. Then, I think that's what it takes. Really just kind of reaching outside of your genre, your immediate first exposure with certain kinds of music, and being able to recognize what makes a song work,
Mm-hmm.
What makes a performer, and those sort of things are more inherent. And I don't believe, of course, no one's going to know an entire history of all music, but I feel that it's inherent with your best musicians and performers that they're always going to have a huge knowledge, for the most part, of different other artists and performers, because they love it,
Mm-hmm.
And if you love it, you're not just going to listen to yourself sing. Something turned you on to that. Influences turned you on to that. I think we've all been, influenced by one style of music or another as we've gotten older, come back to some even, or some have evolved into others, that sort of thing. So I really believe, maybe I actually knew a guy that had never heard drum and bass or really any kind of dance music outside of maybe like something on the radio now and then,
Mm-hmm.
ever. But he and my came out to see me spin one night. Never heard drum and bass music. Was just absolutely mind blown by it. Some things got a little redundant for him, but this is a guy that typically listens to only symphonic music, and was fascinated and really got into some different types of music like that. And so that he had a natural love for music. He was, for whatever reason, kind of kept in that scope, but could recognize something very new and very different in its right presentation as well. And maybe, that has a big thing to do with it too.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing a song in a bad speaker at a bad time is probably not going to turn you on to that music very much.
Definitely not. Yeah.
I mean, for me, people with intellectual curiosity in general, I find to be more interesting. So somebody being a student of their own discipline is always something I'm going to view in a positive light, but I don't think it's a prerequisite for you making good or, epic music or whatever. I just find them to be a more interesting conversation, I guess. But I'd listen to your music regardless, whether you were a student of the game or not.
Limited knowledge of a broad catalog of music can come from a variety of things. Yeah, there's people that are just genuinely disinterested and they're just getting into it for popularity. Or maybe they were sheltered their whole lives because, you know, they were brought up in some cult family.
Or they're a plant.
Or they're a plant, exactly. And they became the first cognitively aware plant or something. But you know, I've met people who are recovered, we'll say recovered cult members. Generally, they were brought up in that kind of community. They didn't join on their own. But when they got
Mormons?
exposed, yeah, perfect example. I wasn't going to name names, but hey, but no, I mean, a lot of the, no, and I absolutely agree. And not even from an abusive level, we'll say, although I think sheltering people from music is sort of an abuse. But yeah, you've heard this bland Osmond Mormon rock your whole life, and that's it. And then someone turns you on to industrial music, and it's like, oh my gosh. You know, I've seen people just explode. You know, I've known some people that just went a little too wild with their lives, but I think as on the whole, you know, it's funny that all this comes up, but in the people I've met like this, it was music that really kind of woke up or turned the light on, if you will, that kind of, you know, made this, that started making this positive division from where they came from. So
I think, you know, I think that's been a lot of the musicians' goals in a lot of these cases too, and even in that, you know, when they were rumors that if you played, you know, Black Sabbath record backwards, you know, be summoning the devil or some shit like that.
yeah,
It's, you know, these types of myths happen because people were actually very scared of the music. They were so scared that they thought it would summon the devil if you played it a certain way. And, you know, those types of myths didn't come out of nowhere.
Oh, and some of it still carries forward in the dumbest ways, you know. And of course, you know, 60 Minutes did a whole quote unquote expose on one of my favorite games of all time, D&D, and talked about how it could be potentially psychologically causing children to kill themselves. I'm just like, sick, you know. And there's Mike Wallace grilling the originator of the game, you know, like he's trying to undermine the youth with rolling dice and, you know,
he's like he's blaming D&D instead of the people who are bullying the kids playing D&D.
Yeah. It was a creative outlet. It involves acting and planning and all kinds of stuff that's, you know, just very conducive to all kinds of learning. And then here, you know,
Well,
but
you know, I think
the things that are criticized.
I think that there are actually programs at like public libraries. I'm pretty sure Monroe County Public Library had one for a long time where there was like magic and Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm pretty sure that that's a fairly common type of service that is not really provided for, but is facilitated through public libraries. You can go and find D&D groups, and you don't even need to know anything. You just show up, and somebody there will be happy to explain how the game works. And what the dice are for, and you know the things that, and then eventually you meet people who are really into it and have these like elaborate suitcases full of all of their like
documents
and tablets of paper and special dice, and that stuff's really cool.
Yeah.
We've got a really interesting game shop in town that for the longest time had like every codex imaginable, and then they also had this like
Cool
giant box of dice sets. So you can get your dice for your Warhammer or your Warhammer 40K or your.
They were packed
Dungeons
the
and
other night.
Dragons.
I drove by and they
I'm
were
sure.
packed.
They probably were having
It
some.
was
game
fucking
night.
standing room only.
Oh, I bet there was some.
There was some
special
game night, yeah, for sure. But it was, you know, I think it was like 9 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
But I had not seen a place packed like that in a while.
It's like, what are they serving alcohol
And
now?
I like to hear that. They're standing room only at the game night. Like, wow.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah. Well, I think in some ways as a culture we've shifted. Not all of us, of course, sadly, but a lot of us have kind of as a culture focused or moved forward and saw the enjoyment and the community and just the learning that can come out of these games. So that's good.
well, I think
When I think back to
wanna-
that 60 Minutes episode, I'm like, oh my God, it was like a different era.
Well, I think people
I'm
are
sorry,
starting
go
to
ahead.
realize that video games can only allow so much interaction with other players, and if you actually want to interact with people and play some kind of game, board games and card games are, second to none. A card game
That
can
makes
be
sense.
some card
It's
games
a
are
social
really
event,
complex.
yeah.
Some of them are like those weird murder games where someone pretends to be
Yeah.
everyone's assigned a character and you got to figure out who did it. So it's like a giant game of Clue where you have to ask everyone questions. And that stuff's kind of
That live role playing, that live acting,
Yeah.
literally.
And then
That element is so much fun.
there are production companies that will facilitate one of those murder games where everyone goes out to dinner and then something happens and then everyone has to. But it's all in a safe environment, so it's not like a street murder game. That'd
I
be
just
kinda
went
weird.
recently to a breakout room in Evansville, Indiana, and that was fun.
Oh, really? How was
Yeah,
that?
it was fun.
Those are cool.
We were just a couple of
I like-
seconds away from getting out, but we didn't get out. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. What was it? What were some of the challenges?
Just trying to find clues and then figure out what in the room was important.
Yeah.
Like, I had a lot of different puzzles just involving numbers.
Just to
and-
find the clues, even.
I mean, yeah, because they're not always self-obvious. So you have a lot of misinformation in the room. So you have things that you think you're looking at that are important that aren't.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of
Just to
fun.
throw you off.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Well,
But what made it fun was the group of people you were with,
Yeah.
and the dialogue that occurred throughout the investigation, so
Yeah.
to speak. Yeah.
There's only so much interaction that a video game environment can facilitate. Even with real time chat. I saw this video of these guys playing Call of Duty, and this guy gets on there and he starts asking people if they want to buy a couch or if they want to buy some DVDs, and it's some of the most heavy duty clown and troll activity, but that's not really quality interaction. That's like, I'm trying to distract you so I can shoot your avatar type interaction. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's not social interaction. That's like, I feel like that's actually very antisocial interaction.
Part of the gameplay almost.
Well, exactly. And so
I could never do like MMO type gaming because it just reminded me too much of work. I was like, wow.
Well,
No.
I think that's part of it is that a game is supposed to be fun and you're supposed to have fun with other people, and if all the game is doing is encouraging you to kill people or talk shit, that's not really a game.
Right.
That's
A sociopath engine.
yeah, the sociopath
Yeah.
engine. I feel no pain because I'm not physically connected to my avatar, but I have unlimited bullets and unlimited grenades, and I can explode everything. And if I die, I'll just respawn.
Oh,
Yeah.
feel joy. by
Ready
making other
Player
people have a
One.
Bad time.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
we're on the verge of a revolution of gaming with haptic suits and just incredible interfaces that will allow a level of immersion that will enable people to truly interact in a game. And it's just a matter of time. Probably longer than we want because it'll probably be really expensive for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I think
but
Sorry, go
it'll
ahead.
come along. And I'm hoping in my idealism, I guess, that with this type of entertainment technology, immersion technology, if you will, that there will be less waste in many cases because when you got that one portal of just one, everything you need, entertainment wise, communication wise, anything, basically a virtual vacation. It's sort of like, you don't need the stereo, you don't need TVs, you don't need, all this other stuff, or people's brains don't in general, I think. So I'm hoping as technology advances that the need for a bunch of stuff isn't needed either. Although that's kind of sad too, because those of us that like devices and or things like that too, it's I don't think it'll ever quite match the real thing. So there'll still be stuff, but I think it'll also limit a lot of unnecessary stuff that people accumulate.
Well,
if that makes sense.
One of the things I've learned is you can't do VR with people. It's because of the headset and the way that you're immersed in the real and into the VR world. It's a individual experience, and I think like even if you're doing it at an arcade, you're still going to be doing it by yourself in a way that playing a video game and looking at the same screen is a different experience. Or even watching a movie or watching a TV show on the same screen is a different experience.
There was a warehouse augmented reality game I read about where people got to go and shoot zombies.
Yeah. That's where augmented reality is a completely different experience. Yeah, I think augmented reality is going to be much more conducive to social experiences than virtual reality.
I feel like augmented reality events will be like an extension of the silent disco, where you get to go. Everyone puts on their silent disco augmented reality headset and goggles, and you go and you listen to the music, and you're in a vacant warehouse. But when you look through the goggles, it's one of three parties. You either get to party in Paris, you get to party in the Caribbean, or Mardi Gras, or you get to party in L.A. or something, and then everyone else is seeing something. One of the three things, and all of these things have like a similar spatial properties. So if it's a tree in one environment, it's a tree in the next environment, but they look different because it's different locations.
It's interesting.
I feel like that's that. Even if you want to, you could load up whatever party you wanted to, in fact, and it would have plug in for all the various environmental artifacts. So you could party on the moon, and instead of a tree, it would be like a crater that you couldn't get into.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it though is there's gonna have to be different elements included to make it more like a different planet or something.
Yeah.
In that, there's gonna have to be like a dune buggy you're riding around in or some shit that makes you. It pulls you out of the local area.
Oh yeah, no.
In a way,
there would be like AR birds would fly overhead, or like a floating light orb would pass through your field of vision periodically.
Well, have you ridden on those rides that it has a screen and it shakes you and it moves you all around, but you don't actually go anywhere?
Yeah.
Those, I think it has to be something like that where it encloses you and doesn't allow you to see the outside world. But obviously, if you're moving around in a warehouse, you'd still be able to see, so you don't bump into shit, but you're only able to see the augmented versions of what you're seeing.
Yeah.
Because I think that if you see your local area and it's not augmented, then it's going to break that immersion in a way that...
You need to... There needs to be some kind of... There needs to be a way to unify the spaces so that it's not like a dark room that you can only see like animated surfaces or CGI. Right. There's got to be some way to marry the two, so that I mean, it might involve specialized projectors that beam information into our eyes, even.
Yeah.
But I think earlier, like he was talking about the live breakout rooms. I think like as an early beta model, if you will, for trying some sort of augmented reality, that would be a good place to start. You have a communal element to it, or it could go solo.
Well, they have one at IU.
There's a
They
map
have one
out.
at IU. It's called The
okay.
Cave. They've had that there for years.
Yeah.
In that,
The cave's been around since I was like in high school.
so if you walk in a way, you walk in a specific direction, it's going to map the image with your direction that you're walking. It's gonna, that's a version of augmented reality that it's been, super expensive then, but I think now those projectors are down to like $6,000.
Yeah.
Something, that it's not crazy expensive for that type of projector. But to get a full room, you'd probably need 6 or 7 of those or something. So
Yeah.
that'd be an actual, really expensive build. But, there are these different levels of immersive environments that are available already. And again, I think this is kind of where it's hard to find a really good use for them that is monetizable or cheap enough to be in a situation where you don't have to monetize it.
Years ago, a buddy of mine was at the Art Institute of Chicago, and he was telling me that they were working on this like fashion runway project where they were going to have the model walk up and down the runway wearing an outfit made out of the blue or green chroma key colored fabric, and light the shit out of them so they were nice and bright. But basically, they were going to like change the fabric in post, and then so the product was a video of a runway event where someone's walking up and down a catwalk and showing the textures change in real time. Like I think that there are
pretty cool.
attempts to utilize this kind of technology in ways that we're not seeing. It's not as obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've had augmented reality presentations for a long time in television, like in sports. The last time I saw it, was at a
3D Tupac.
yeah, even Tupac and hologram MJ and hologram anyone else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at a point, well, I mean, those aren't even that old. But they've had illustrations on screens on television for 50 years, it seems. They've been able to do all sorts of interesting things with chroma key. It's just a matter of how sophisticated it is. And we've got there's incredible technology, of course. And as you've hinted out, it's the projection, and it's knowing what the surface is that they're projecting on, and being able to choreograph all of these things. It's a very unique like synergy that is achieved when we're talking about these performances that have a structural element that moves, but also isn't as it's not as fluid as a performer who's playing an instrument who can decide to do something, embellish something. So, I think it's interesting. There's a lot of like bold frontier, actually. I think in this augmented virtual environment space.
Mm-hmm.
I really think it's just a matter of how do we convince people to buy a new set of headphone sunglasses.
It has to be different enough of an experience for it to be worth it.
Yeah, has to be worth it.
It has to be cheap enough to where being worth it isn't an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
Because that's, again...
Yeah, like Google Glass.
Yeah.
That was cool, but it wasn't worth it.
No,
It
not
had
at
such
all.
poor resolution that it was kind of just like a heads-up display on a car.
I think the Microsoft HoloLens is $4,000 or something
Yeah,
like that. Nobody's paying $4,000.
Nobody's paying to help Microsoft develop that technology.
Right, no.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I got to roll, but it's been great.
Yeah, man. Thanks
I'll
for calling.
check in. Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And if you have time at the end of the show, cue up Richard Harris, MacArthur's Park. It'll make you giggle or something. So anyway,
Good stuff, man.
have a good afternoon.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I've never heard of that song. So it'll be interesting to hear.
I'm gonna look up that Bruce Willis, man.
Oh my God, Bruce Willis's music was terrible. It
Yeah,
was
I mean-
real bad. His music is worse than Eddie Murphy's.
Wow.
Eddie Murphy's music has gotten steadily better, though.
Exactly.
Like, Eddie Murphy has turned
Yeah.
out to be like a really talented reggae artist.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm pretty sure Bruce Willis just still invests in House of Blues or something like that,
Uh-huh.
or rock and was it the rock and roll? Yeah, it is the House of Blues.
I thought it was House Blues. Yeah.
Yeah, which is cool. I mean, he likes that music. He wants to be a part of that music culture, and that's fine.
Did
Play
you
the
ever listen
harmonica.
to Snoop's reggae stuff?
Yeah, he
Oh.
made a bunch of reggae stuff with Eddie Murphy.
No.
Eddie Murphy was the best part of
That,
it.
No, I don't listen to.
Snoop
it
Lion.
was awful.
It was
I
terrible.
mean, honestly, like the beats weren't bad, and
That's
I
'cause-
don't even think the writing was all that bad. But him trying to do a fake Jamaican accent,
No,
it just sounded.
That's
awful.
because like
Awful.
he worked with people who make good reggae.
No, I mean, yeah, the music could have been something. Even if he would have done his regular Snoop Dogg voice, it would have been a little bit better.
He was
It's
trying to
just-
be Snoop Lion. Did you
Yeah,
see
it
the
was-
documentary where he went to Jamaica? Nah. He went down to Jamaica to smoke weed with people, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this is some heavy shit. Here, smoke this." And one guy like starts coughing and doesn't stop coughing for a while. he has a
Jamaican weed is garbage.
he has like a full-time blunt roller who's like, "Now this is the secret. When I get done rolling it up, I put it in the toaster oven." He toasts it.
Oh, I was so disappointed with Jamaican weed. Oh, I was so disappointed.
I mean, all that shit is like, yeah, kind of regular weed, right?
I mean, yeah, it's like swag, but you know, it's supposed to be Jamaica.
Yeah, but that was before all the indoor shit started popping. All the,
Not really. I mean, it was going to Amsterdam for at least 30 years. Because I mean, fuck, Bob Marley talk about Sensimilla, so
Yeah.
like, he got seedless shit somehow.
you ain't get no seedless over there.
Fuck no. Fuck no.
Got that ditch weed, huh?
You're like
God,
walking around.
that's
it's
what
like-
everybody was smoking. I was
throwing
smoking with the
seeds.
locals, man. They weren't smoking no chronic. You would have been able to smell chronic if anybody was smoking it. Everybody was smoking swag when I was there. I mean, I'm sure by now there's definitely not, but this was not.
Surely
it wasn't-
the industry
I'm not
has
that
changed.
old.
Yeah.
I'm not 75 years old or anything
When'd you
like
go
that. It was 97 or so. Was it 98, 97, 98? But yeah, you know, it was. They definitely, because I had smoked chronic by then,
Right. It was.
so I
around.
knew what chronic was.
It was
you know what I mean? I
around.
knew what to look for. I wasn't that. You know.
Yeah, it's I think that it's pretty easy to take for granted how good the grass is in America.
Yeah.
The grass is greener here.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
excellent.
I mean, even
You got to go to like the marijuana Olympics or something like that, or the what is that the cannabis cup?
well, even then they're holding the cannabis cup in like Detroit now and shit.
Yeah.
Oh well, never mind.
Yeah, we should go. Man.
Yeah. They had it in Michigan last year, I think. It
Yeah.
might be
It was.
coming up again. I don't know. But, you know,
I think it's in the summertime, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
They might do a couple of them a year now.
Whatever the one they do in Australia, I think that's the marijuana Olympics. Where they have like,
I'm not going down there.
oh, you don't want
Australia.
to be on a plane for 27 hours or something.
Nah, man, it's got them poisonous ass bugs and snakes and shit.
Everything's
man.
trying to kill you down
Yeah,
there.
man. I'm not used to the flora and fauna down there. I don't do that.
So the only time in my life when I didn't experience allergies was when I was in mainland China, and my allergies completely disappeared
That's crazy.
for like a week and a half.
Uh-huh.
I got like 0 allergies. It was great. Come
From
back to
pollution,
America. I don't know what it was. It's all the camphor trees and all the green tea. Like I was all hopped up on green tea and surrounded
okay.
by like trees that clear your sinuses. So
Nice.
um,
What are they called?
camphor,
Camphor trees.
CAMPHOR, camphor. It kind of smells like eucalyptus, except not quite as off-putting.
Mm. Nice.
So if you like the smell of eucalyptus, you probably would like the smell of camphor. I don't know though, because eucalyptus is strong to me. A lot of things are really strong to me.
Mm.
Yeah, there's definitely different geographic sensitivities to spices or perfumes or.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, because
spicy food.
Yeah, I was gonna say because people's ability to eat spicy food seems to be very much relative to their
Culture.
Yeah.
upbringing. Because I don't know, I'll eat. I had a chicken sandwich last night, and the guy was like, "You want extra hot sauce on it?" I'm like, "Yes."
Wait, how much hot sauce is on there already?
Right. That's what I'm like. I don't
Like-
care, but sure. Like I don't know if I'm gonna regret this, but yes. And that's where I know some people. When I tasted the sandwich, I knew that it would have burned some people's faces off. But that's where
I worry about sandwiches though, because some people's concept of, take it easy on the mayo is, they're really taking it easy, but sometimes it's not, and it's still like a giant glop of mayonnaise.
Yeah, it's always a risk having other people make your food.
When I go to Subway, it's like, could you go very light on the mayo, like one strip? And so they grab the light mayo. It's like, fine.
Yeah. Well, I think the older we get, the more of a risk it is to have somebody else make our food because we know what the fuck we want.
Yeah.
But nobody else does. And that, I think there's only so many different dishes.
Yeah.
Period.
Mm-hmm.
There's only so many different spices. Period. And then obviously the variation is in the mixing of them. But then there's only so many different ways you can mix spices. So after
after a while, I feel like I've seen a lot of recipes online that were they were published because they needed to publish the volume of pieces, but it didn't really matter what the outcome tasted like.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I made, I'm not even going to say anything about what I made because it was very clearly something I shouldn't have. But there are some spices that don't work together.
Yeah.
And some things are experiments that shouldn't be published. Like, people need to keep their work to themselves sometimes and be objective, because not all things can go together. Just because you throw a bunch of butter in something doesn't mean it's gonna like resurrect it from the
Yeah,
dead.
I hate that whole. I put way too much butter and salt on my food, so I know how to season it properly. Like, nah, you don't know how to cook is what the problem
Yeah.
is.
The only time I want to see a bunch of butter in a dish is if it's like
French.
an extremely hot pan that's like getting ready to make a crepe or something, or to like make some kind of Vichy.
It's an easy way to fool the taste buds into thinking something's good.
Yeah, you put some sugar in my rice.
Yeah. Well,
You
I
That's
love
offensive.
sugar.
Cook,
That's fucking offensive.
I love it though. I
I mean, it tastes good.
Yeah.
Butter and sugar and rice
Yeah,
tastes
it
pretty
fucking
good.
tastes
I thought
delicious.
it'd be nasty, but it's not. It's not
It's
at all.
delicious.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's not supposed to be in there. And that's where, again, it's the same shit with like grits. Fuck yeah, I'll put sugar on my grits. But that's because I don't like regular ass grits.
Yeah, I put
I like the texture, not the taste.
strawberry jam.
Exactly.
Let me change
is
this
good
shit.
with grits.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the same shit. You're putting sugar in there. It's just strawberry flavored sugar. That's all that is.
Yeah, I don't know. I put salt on grapefruits.
Those are so good for breakfast. Y'all making me hungry, man.
You want one of these cookies?
Made from scratch.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Yep. That's what I was gonna say. A good example. I've been perfecting that recipe.
Is this the shortbread recipe?
No, it's lace cookies. I'm good. Those are for you guys.
Okay.
But it's like one of the things with perfecting recipes is then you can start experimenting. Like, you can't experiment on that shit until you have it perfected. And I think that's where
I agree with that.
you get
You
go
got
look
that foundation.
right.
That's
you
how
go
you
look
go
at
exploring.
Picasso's early work.
Mm-hmm.
It's foundational art that's traditional stuff. Like, you can't be Picasso without knowing how to.
Yeah, see, I be getting into it with my lady about cooking because of that, because I want to cook something by the recipe a few times before I just start changing the
Right,
recipe
you
up
got to.
willy-nilly.
You have to.
And she's always just trying to move shit around.
Well, because if you don't cook it the first time by the recipe, you don't know how it's
What
supposed to
it
taste
tastes like, yeah.
in the first place. Because then, you find out shit. Like, so for example, with these cookies, if you don't use the right flour, it doesn't caramelize right or some shit like that. So that's where it's like there's things like I tried to substitute the first time out of necessity, and it didn't work right because then it's like
the common flour that we get at the store isn't really the best flour to make bread out of. There are special like yeasts and special bread flours to use to get
for different kinds of breads too.
Yeah, and you gotta.
All purpose is not right.
No, it's not. All purpose is like the dregs of flour.
Yeah.
It just happens to be a lot.
It works equally bad with everything.
Yep.
That's how you know.
Yep. But that's like, okay, so you guys had those cookies, and it's like, what I'm trying to do is get to a point where every time I make those cookies, that's what it tastes like. Because otherwise, if I don't make a predictable flavor, then I'm not making the same recipe. And I think that's where...
That's actually my qualm about a small batch brew
Yeah.
of beer or a small batch of anything. Really, it's like, great, well, this one might be good. But by the time we get to the next batch, nobody's going to remember what the first batch tasted like. And that's like, I think that's like the challenge of any product is long-term consistency. Because trends, the trends in taste change. And what people like one day to the next will change. But what makes a brand interesting and is like its longevity and like it's how long it can keep doing one thing. And it's not to say that they can't add other things and that other things shouldn't compete with the first thing.
But you can't have nostalgia without consistency.
Yeah, exactly.
It's impossible.
You just can't.
Yeah, they be changing some of these 20-year-old recipes. It really messed up the taste of my childhood.
Yeah, and then you don't get the proper nostalgia effect. And you're like, fuck this handy snack. Or
these motherfuckers created a dragon for everyone to chase.
Dunkaroos bullshit. This ain't the original Dunkaroos, motherfucker. I'm not fooled.
Shit.
Cookie Crisp. Yeah, I know you changed the recipe, Cookie Crisp. It's not the same.
Yeah.
Shit like that, man. But that's where McDonald's, the motherfucking
The McRib.
Egg McMuffin tastes exactly the same as the first time you goddamn ate it. Sausage and egg biscuit. That shit tastes exactly the same as the first time you goddamn ate it.
I don't like gambling, but I'm willing to put money down that when there's a Impossible McRib, nobody's gonna be able to taste the difference.
Nope. Yeah, I 100% agree, man.
Like nobody will be able to taste the difference. They've been hiding.
This is Impossible McRib. Yeah, we're just now converting it to meatless meat. Wink, wink.
Even though they've clearly been perfecting it for the last however long the McRib has existed.
I remember they had a McVeggie burger when I was a kid, and I tried it, and it was the same fucking shit. You could not tell the difference. And and then they took it away. And I was pissed because I was like trying to lose weight. I was a fat kid, and I'm
like, this is working for me.
Yeah, for sure. Because I was dude, I remember when the Dream Team came out with the triple cheeseburger.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be a Dream Team eating triple cheeseburger. Steady getting fatter.
You're like, Dream Team.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's not working.
Well, because again, when you're in 4th or 5th grade, you don't understand how these things work. So you see Michael Jordan eat a triple cheeseburger, you're like, oh, I'll eat a triple cheeseburger, get some Jordans, I'll be Michael Jordan.
He only eats like one of those every 10 years, probably.
Right. Yeah. If he ever eats, I don't know if Michael Jordan ever eat a fucking
for the
McDonald's
commercial,
burger.
he would just take a bite of it and spit it out. They'd give him a different one to reshoot.
Yeah. And he's like, get me a steak. Get me actual food. I mean, but then that's where, sometimes I love that synthesized fucking replicator. Patty, yeah.
The replicator patty.
Like McDonald's, I look at McDonald's as the equivalent of going to the replicator when I don't feel like cooking.
Well, Impossible is making a lot of headway with their pork project in
Fuck
China.
yeah, and their chicken project. They're
And their
about to
chicken
put out the
project.
chicken at KFC. Or no, it's Beyond. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Beyond's doing chicken.
I can't wait. I
Yeah.
can't wait. And I'm
The
you
initial
know,
test for the Beyond chicken did really well,
Yeah.
as far as I understand.
If I can eat something and every time nothing has to die and I don't have to tell the difference between that, I'm fucking all for it. Because that's where I had an Impossible Whopper a couple days ago. That shit tasted exactly like a regular ass Whopper. My
Except
taste buds could not tell the difference.
They're not as dry as normal Whoppers.
Right. Yeah. Damn. It's a little juicier burger. Damn. Yeah. No, man.
I mean, who's gonna complain about that?
No. And
Somebody will.
Well, yeah, because they're gonna end up getting it all over their pants or their shirt or something because they don't need a burger because they've been trained with fake burgers with real meat.
Well, and they don't have any cholesterol in them. So 0 cholesterol. So that's clearly going to be better for your fucking arteries.
Yeah, and then the whole sodium content malarkey. I feel like drink more water is the solution to that.
Right.
Just drink more water.
Or eat one a week and not one every day.
God, who's the target?
Bro, you know how many lazy ass people will go out to eat every day of the week instead of once a week? Like,
That just makes my stomach hurt.
it makes my stomach, it makes my brain hurt. Because, you know, when I think about how much of our food we cook at home and then we go out to eat on the weekends, if
If you do it all.
if at all,
Yeah.
it is so much better on the gut because then every time we do, you realize how much extra sodium is in the shit. And you have to go back to baseline. Like, I'm fasting right now to get back to baseline.
So you can taste food again.
Exactly. Otherwise, your taste buds get so blown out by their fucking crazy disproportionate ratios that you can't even... I couldn't... Oh my God.
You couldn't taste the
Dude,
pizza.
I had a fucking sea salt and chocolate covered almond after the chicken sandwich. It tasted hot. I couldn't taste anything but hot because my taste buds were so blown out. Like, it wasn't bad flavor, but I couldn't taste anything but hot.
When I eat hot or spicy foods, my goal is to get that brow sweat and the sweat underneath my eyes, and so I can feel that food buzz kick in real good. But generally, it goes away. And and the only times that I've been able to get to that same place with like a hot sauce, it's always like something that seems like it's based on a dare. Like they don't taste good. They're just hot.
Yeah.
And those things have a very different chemical flavor profile, obviously. But I'm not even sure that they're supposed to be used directly on food. I think they're supposed to be used like a drop into a sauce that you mix up and then you put onto your food. Or like a drop into an entire pot of soup.
For if you actually wanted to taste,
if you wanted the flavor, it would be a drop diffused into several quarts of water.
Same with vanilla.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same shit with vanilla.
Yeah.
But people don't understand that shit, and then they're like, "I want to douse my chicken with this hot sauce because I'm gonna be a badass."
No,
no,
so,
bro.
Like when I do a stir
regret
fry,
that shit.
I get my oil nice and hot, and then I put in some chili oil if I want to add some chili to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a stage that you put all that stuff in there, but it doesn't need to be a lot. I feel like there's got to be some kind of enhanced risk of damage to your esophagus
and your intestines.
and your intestine. I mean, even if it's just from like from having to cough up whatever, because at some point it just lines you.
Mm-hmm.
Although I have seen people eat entire jars of pickled jalapeno peppers and be fine. So
I mean, not the next day.
Yeah, I'm sure it hurts on the way out.
It definitely hurts on the way out, and that's like, people act like that shit doesn't hurt on the way out. Fuck yeah, it does. Fuck yeah, it does.
Tender asshole after that. Boy.
You're gonna regret that shit, and that's the craziest part about it is people don't think about the consequences, and that's where. When people do those types of hot challenges,
see, that's why I feel like all that shit's just based on a dare, because it can't possibly be fun.
Fuck yeah, it is not. It's not fun.
Like with food, I have a threshold where it's like, okay, this is just so hot I can't even taste it.
Yeah.
That's my threshold. If that's what happens, I can't even. There's no point.
What is it? Like 50,000 Scovilles or something. there's a point where you can't taste it anymore.
Yeah, you just can't.
It's too.
Yeah.
There's too many Scovilles for your taste buds to actually process it, and it is just burning yourself for no reason at that point. And once you look at it,
the same thing happens when you put too much ice in a beverage at the movie theater. They encourage like lots of ice because they
water it down.
Water it down.
But I don't ever hardly drink ice.
What goes on in that what happens though is that the ice causes your taste buds to react less efficiently, and so you can't even really taste what you're drinking at that point. You're getting cold flavor, and a cold flavor is like super subdued. It's like being numb.
Yeah.
So I imagine at the opposite end of the spectrum, when your taste buds stop working for a similar type of overload of sensory input, I can only imagine that at that point it's just numb.
Yeah, but it's also because it's numb and you're also still getting the stimulation from the Scovilles. It's like you're injecting a drug, or you might as well be fucking smoking heroin or
capsaicin junkies.
Yeah,
It's like shooting Bacardi 151.
basically.
Whole face just goes numb.
Basically.
It's not for good reasons.
That shit definitely catches on fire.
I feel like that's the kind of thing you'd have to do if you had to perform surgery on somebody, like when camping and you're also like 70 to 100
Drink
miles
this
away.
half pint.
Yeah, drink a bunch of this real quick, and then you pour it all over the incision site.
Yeah.
And this is gonna hurt.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Man, who drinks 151 that's not in college?
Pirates.
Who drinks Everclear that's not in college?
Somebody that wants something that's really strong and they don't want to carry very much fluid drinks 151.
Yeah.
And then they're really judicious about it because you can't drink a lot.
Taste it, man. It's a bullshit drink, man.
Well,
All it does is make your mouth numb, and you just start drooling on yourself.
I think that's the point, though, is that it's supposed to be mixed with a bunch of fruit drink.
Yeah, it is. It's a mixer. You can't drink it straight. But people would do that to prove a point.
If you were going to do it, though, the only reason to do it would be to maximize alcoholic potential for volume.
Man,
That's the only reason.
maximize your potential
And you
for
can't
poisoning.
and you don't have any access to like real hardcore grain alcohol.
Mm-hmm. In case you don't have any moonshine.
If you ain't got a moonshine guy, 151 is out there.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, that stuff is awful.
Fuck both of those.
That's its own kind of weird, nasty world, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
I feel like those are the people that end up drinking hand sanitizer to get a buzz.
Mouthwash and
mouthwash. I feel like that might be the same crowd that's doing fucking like using Lysol for deodorant.
Yeah.
Whatever's on hand.
Fuck that.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.